girls who are not even close to being in the same social group all end up in a very similar situation. They're all shoplifters and are all required by law to attend a Shoplifters Anonymous group. The three girls themselves are very different from one to the next. There's Tabitha, who is one of the most popular girls in school and comes from one of the richest families in the city. Then there's Elodie, who's fairly new to the city and is a bit of a goody two-shoes. And then there's Mo, who is a total burnout. All three girls are very different from each other, but they all end up in the same situation, and through this, end up forming an unlikely friendship that doesn't seem to be possible. The novel Trinkets by Kirsten Smith tells the story of these three girls as their friendship blossoms from this one meeting that they attend. So one of the most interesting things that I found about the novel itself was actually about the author. In the back of the book with the author's bio, it talks about how Kirsten Smith is actually a screenwriter and has actually done movies like 10 Things I Hate About You, Legally Blonde, The House Bunny, She's the Man, and Whip It. So she is very familiar with very realistic settings and very interesting dynamics between people. So this was an interesting kind of dynamic for her. Instead of writing for a movie, it's writing for a reader who is going to be seeing this kind of movie play in their heads, which I think was pretty clever. Overall, I think the novel was very, very cute. There's this interesting thing that happens with realistic fiction where you tend to use characters that are very run-of-the-mill, very ordinary high school teenagers. However, Kirsten Smith kind of takes that and turns it a little bit on its side, making her main characters actual criminals instead of just run-of-the-mill people. Now, typically you don't see that in realistic fiction, so it was definitely a nice breath of fresh air for me because I never read a realistic fiction book that was based off of criminals. And so it's really just interesting to see this kind of difference in the dynamic between this book and other realistic fiction novels. And the novel itself was actually from three different perspectives from each of the main characters, Elodie, Tabitha, and Mo. And while sometimes that can be really hard to do, I feel like Kirsten did a really good job of being able to flow those perspectives very well. When it comes to a lot of multiple perspective novels, the problem is that sometimes it can feel like there's just too many people narrating at once about the same thing. However, Kirsten does what I think is the most effective way to use multiple perspectives, and that is to have each narrator from one to the next go in a chronological time period across the story. Whereas instead, what a lot of authors do with multiple perspectives that is very, very bad is they will have each character relay the same event through their eyes, and that can get very, very confusing. So it's really awesome that Kirsten Smith did not do that because I feel like it would have made the novel a lot harder to understand as opposed to what she actually did, which was create a chronological timeline with each perspective. I want to warn that anyone who reads this is going to have to be probably anywhere from 15 and up because there is a lot of sexual language, there's a lot of talk about drugs and alcohol, and there actually is some minor domestic abuse going on in the story, so that can be very triggering for some people. So I would recommend no one under the age of 15 should read this because anyone younger may not really understand what's going on, or it doesn't seem appropriate for the age. That's just a little forewarning. However, I don't feel like it really distracted from the novel. I feel like Kirsten really did a nice job with making the novel seem real. She didn't sugarcoat anything. She didn't really kind of make everything rainbows and unicorns. It was very, very real and very hard-hitting in some aspects. There's a lot of talk about, divorce. There's a lot of talk about, losing family members. So that's stuff that's really real, but it all affected the characters in different ways, which I really thought was cool because it added a lot of depth to each of the characters themselves. And then along with that, there can't be a teenage novel without some form of drama going on with one of the characters, or all of the characters for that matter. However, I feel like Kirsten Smith did a really nice job of trying to minimize that amount because I feel like in a lot of realistic fiction novels, especially in novels like Gossip Girl, where it's all centered around drama, those kind of novels are really hard to take in because there's just so much drama that's going on, you just really don't want to read any of it. That's my personal opinion. Like, I can't stand reality TV shows half the time, like Keeping Up with the Kardashians or anything on like the E! Network because it doesn't pique my interest. It's just nothing but drama and drivel to me. But I really like how Kirsten kept it to a minimum in this novel because that was not the point of the novel. The whole point of the novel was centered around these three girls and their friendship. Everything else that was kind of going outside of that was important because it kind of built some depth to the characters themselves and it helped shape them in a way, but it didn't distract from the overall intent of the novel, which was in fact the friendship between the girls themselves. Overall, for a book that I found in the dollar store of all places, this novel was absolutely amazing. Probably one of the best realistic fiction books I have read in a very, very long time, and so I highly recommend this to anybody who is looking for something kind of more realistic and maybe even looking for something a little bit on the outskirts of kind of, you know, vigilante criminal kind of stories, because it's not really like a heavy criminal story, but it's an interesting kind of perspective when you're reading a story from perspectives of a criminal who is kind of like not really trying to change their ways, but they kind of meet people along the way who are like them. It's really, really interesting, and I think a lot of people would really enjoy it. The next book I'm going to be reviewing is actually a book that I found alongside Trinkets on the same shopping trip to the dollar store, and the book is called The Caretaker by A.X. Ahmad. Now, I really don't know much about this story, but it seems kind of creepy because of how like the font color here is with all the keys and everything and a little house. So what I'm thinking is it's going to be some kind of like thriller novel, and whether it's kind of mystery based or not, I'm not really 100% sure. But I'm really interested to see how it looks because when I read it, read the inside jacket of it, all it really says is basically in India there's this army leader who kind of is now a caretaker in a vineyard, and there's this really big winter storm that hits, and just basically all this crap happens to him and he has to kind of like work his way through it. So probably going to be more on the thriller side, and I'm pretty excited because, you know, after reading a very kind of frou-frou realistic novel story, it's nice to get back to the thriller stuff. So I'm really excited to see how this one will turn out. But thank you guys so much for joining me in this book review of Trinkets by Kirsten Smith. I hope you guys all enjoyed it. If you did, please do give it a big thumbs up. And if you're not already and you'd like to be, hit the button down below and subscribe to become an owlet in our flock. And I will see all of you guys in my next video. Bye guys!